Welcome to the podcast. Thomas Miller here. This episode is going to run on both fun astrology and subconscious mind mastery, so whichever one you're catching this on, welcome to the podcast. And I have to say, buckle in for the next about 20 minutes because this one could change your life dramatically. I don't say that very often, but I experienced it personally and now handing it off to you. Back in November of 2022, memorialized in episode number 314 of the Subconscious Mind Mastery podcast, I did a hypnotherapy session with Stevie McGuire. She's a podcast listener who I had done an astrology reading for that it was obvious that she would do really well in some kind of counseling. And she tells her story of why she chose hypnotherapy in this episode. So back in November, she was doing her practicum and got to the point where she needed to do some real sessions. She offered one to me, and I obviously took her up on it. Neither of us knew what to expect, but what unfolded, and I will refer you back to that podcast, was fundamentally life-altering in a way that I had no way to anticipate would even be there to uncover. I didn't realize that the entire feminine side of my soul had been imprisoned for a long, long time. And through this process of combining astrology and hypnotherapy, that was unlocked. I want you to meet the person who helped me do that, Stevie McGuire. Well, Stevie, this is long overdue. Welcome to the podcasts.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Well, it's always good to start at the beginning and get a context. So how did you decide to get into this? Why?
I think, like everybody, I had issues. I had things that were stopping me. I had irrational fears. I had traumas, just a lot of blockages. And I tried traditional therapy, to do those things or to work through those things. And astrology, of course, is an excellent tool for self-reflection and learning about oneself. And was it a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, that you gave me my reading, my astrology reading, and it was remarkable. It was such an enlightening experience to get that reading and have a lot of things validated. Not just that, I was a creative artistic type, but that it was very much part of my path to be some type of therapist, some type of healer, some type of communicator for those things. And it was shortly before this reading that I had found a newspaper clipping of my grandmother, who I didn't really know very well, didn't live near, very few memories of. And I found this newspaper clipping, and it was the local paper here where I live in Spokane. And she was the co-owner of 3 hypnotherapy clinics. And my uncle helped her manage them. And I was blown away because I had never known this information. My dad had simply told me, "Oh, your grandma used to make tapes to help people quit smoking in their sleep." And that was the extent of what I knew about. I didn't even know that was hypnotherapy when he said that at the time. And so, when you were giving me my reading, I was like, "Well, what about hypnotherapy?" And you were like, "Yes, that would totally fall into this category of things that you would be really great at." And so, fast forward a little bit, and I reached out to a local woman here who has her own hypnotherapy institute and asked her some questions. And at the very end of the conversation, I said, "Hey, did you happen to know this woman? She was my grandma." And the lady, who is now my mentor and instructor, was like, "Oh my gosh, I absolutely." She's like, "I didn't know her like personally, but when she retired, she she referred all of her clients to me." So my grandma had referred all of her clients to this woman who, fast forward 30 years, would be my mentor in hypnotherapy. And she's a remarkable woman. She's been doing it for 40 years. And it's been such an incredible experience to not just learn hypnotherapy, but in the process of learning it, I had to actually go through all the things that I was learning. I had to get inner child regression sessions. I had to get past life sessions. It's just made huge changes as far as how I navigate this world, how I navigate the challenges in my own birth chart, how I have been able to move past some of the fears that have held me back from the things that I'm meant to be doing, like this.
What was one of the main things that came up that released some of those shackles for you?
I think the biggest thing for me and for most people is an inner child regression. One of the things that's important to remember about the subconscious mind is that it doesn't understand past, present, or future. It has no concept of time, and it has no concept of fact or fiction. So that's what our conscious mind and our critical factor is for. Our critical factor, our conscious mind, is there to decipher time for us and put that in perspective and to determine fact and fiction, what's true, what's not true. And the important thing to remember is that when something traumatic happens in your life, especially in your childhood, that memory is constantly happening on a loop. Everything that has ever happened to you or that ever will happen to you that you've imagined, that you've created a image of in your mind, is essentially playing on a loop. And so until you go and rescue that inner child in a hypnosis session, until you go back and you go to that memory and you ask that child, what do you need? What's going to make you feel safe? And then you remove that child from that situation. That child is in there. The child is in your subconscious, or your inner child is in your subconscious, driving your behavior from a place of fear and lack of safety. And so when you rescue the inner child, then all of a sudden your inner child is operating from a place of feeling safe and feeling loved and feeling secure, and it changes your entire perspective on every situation moving forward. So for me right now, all the time, my inner child is with me in my car. My inner child is no longer in that memory where she felt unseen and unheard and unsafe. I rescued her. And, for me, one of my most favorite, safest places is in my car, driving around. I love it. I feel secure. I feel in control. I like it. There's freedom. In my mind, my inner child, both at the age of 6 and 12, because I've done multiple inner child rescues, they're always with me in the back seat of my car, and we are always driving through life, and they're safe. I've got them. They're with me. I am there to take care of them and protect them and make sure they have space to express themselves. And so because a few versions of my inner child are with me instead of in those memories, I'm able to operate from a place of security instead of fear. And so, yeah, it can be hugely life-changing.
Those kids were hiding, weren't they? They were afraid.
Yeah. And a lot of times trauma is set in even deeper by how we're handled in a traumatic situation. Whatever the thing is that happened, whatever the event, the moment, the traumatic thing that happened is half of it. The other half of it is, how were you taken care of during that traumatic event? How were your feelings and your safety handled immediately during and after that traumatic event? For example, if somebody gets into an accident and immediately following that accident, they're coddled, they're taken care of, they're reassured of their safety, they're taking, our brains know that bad things are going to happen. We learn from our subconscious learns from what happens to us when that bad thing happens. That's what our subconscious carries with us, is what's going to happen to us if this bad thing happens again. And so that's where we get triggers and panic attacks is, say you got in a really bad car accident when you were younger, and ever since then you've just had a fear of being in vehicles. They make you uncomfortable, that you don't like being in them. It's because you got in this accident and nobody ever secured you afterwards to let you know, like, hey, this isn't going to happen every time you get in a car. That was, and so without that security and aftercare in a traumatic event, you get somebody who's trapped in that moment. They were never secured afterwards.
Do you realize how freeing this can be for so many people?
It can be incredible. All of our limits as human beings are self-imposed. Like they're like we create our own prosperity. We create our own reality. Every every limit that we have is self-imposed. If there is a problem in your mind, then the solution is also in your mind. It's all already inside you, all of your answers, all of your resolutions, and everything you have, everything that you need in order to get through your own blockages is right there.
Well, you're combining somebody's astrology chart with this as well. And as I got further and further into astrology, I realized I was just sitting there saying, oh my gosh, if this could be combined with somebody that understood astrology, that could do the past life regression hypnotherapy, combined with what that chart says is that person's path, that would be the ultimate therapeutic process that you could go through. Got to looking around, and there was really one person in the whole country of America that was doing this, and she is booked up solid for the rest of her days. And that validated the point, number one, but also we need more people out there who are trained and are pursuing this the way that you are to combine the two. I didn't feel that it was my highest and best at the time. Maybe someday I'll revisit that. I don't know. But I just felt that my role in all of this might be a little bit different, not to be doing these sessions all day like you're doing. But I just think that this is one of the greatest gifts. And Stevie, there aren't many out there that have this same perspective that you do.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just because I spend so much time listening to, your podcast and talking with people about these things. So in my little worldview, I'm like, everybody loves this, everybody knows about this stuff, and I forget that, there's actually a huge part of the population that doesn't have the astrology knowledge, and it's still kind of new to them. But everybody has trauma, everybody, suffers, and everybody has a birth chart. And like you said, the person with the right training can come in and take the information from both fields and put them together and say, here, I have a really, really individual customized answer for you. It's really fascinating when you can pull somebody's chart and gather all of that information and cut years off of the therapy time just by knowing so much immediately. Having both their past life, like Robert Glasscock says, you rotate the chart, ninth house and 12th house, and that gives you a lot. And then you do a session with the info, once you've given the client that information from their chart and they've had a few days or so to kind of resonate on it and really sit with it and see what kind of comes forward on their own. And then we go back and do an actual past life or an inner guide session and see what information their subconscious wants to bring forward to match with that.
Yeah, it truly is amazing. I'd love for people to get in their mind what a session or sessions with you might look like. Can you tell us what working with you would entail?
I do in-person sessions if you're local, obviously. For most people, most listeners, it would be over Zoom if you're not in the Washington State area. And what it would look like to do the combination astrology hypnotherapy is it would be a minimum 2 sessions. It's likely going to be more depending on, how many layers you want to pull back. We're very layered and complex human beings, and usually one session will get you, a good layer pulled back. But the first session would be an astrology reading where we're just going through your chart. We're looking at specifically, I'm looking at things like the midheaven and the nodes, the ascendant, the ninth and 12th house if we're doing past life. Just the overall energy of the chart too. And so once we get a good idea of the chart and the person's past lives or traumas from that aspect, then we would schedule the second session, which would be the hypnotherapy session. And then from there, it's me following the client's lead as far as them just explaining to me what's happening and how does that feel, and then eventually the rewrite. How do you want it to feel? How would this be better? What would make you feel safe? What would feel good? How do you want this to look? One of the things that we can use past life regression for is to bring forward character traits and abilities that we maybe don't think we have in this life. So you wanted to be a performer, but you had stage fright in this life. It's very personal for me. I have tons of stage fright. Well, not tons. I have a lot less now than I used to because of hypnotherapy, but I've always wanted to be on stage. And what you can do is regress back to a past life where you were that, where you did embody that characteristic, where you did embody that persona that you wanted to be. And you go back and you see yourself as that person in that life, knowing that that is you, that is a version of you. And you can dialogue with this past life version of yourself, and you can bring forward in the session. You're essentially telling your subconscious, like, you do have these abilities, you can do this. And then you bring that forward into your present life. And so post-hypnotic suggestions are just are anchors, the things that we're anchoring into the subconscious from the session. If it was a child regression, then it would be, you are loved, you are safe, you are free to express yourself, and things like that. Past lives would be similar. It's an amazing experience because if the client is willing and cooperative, and I keep myself open yet separate, it creates a really beautiful space for their subconscious and my intuition to work together to help guide them and get them to where they are trying to go. Because your subconscious knows what you need far more than I could ever guess. Everyone knows your subconscious knows exactly what it wants to bring to the surface. And if I'm using my intuition and listening to my subconscious in that moment, then the two will communicate beautifully, and your mind will go exactly where it needs to, and the healing that needs to happen will absolutely happen.
Well, I'm so glad that you're giving this gift to the world. And I have an idea. Are you ready?
Yes.
Why don't we do one? Let's do another one, but we're going to do it live and put it on Facebook and YouTube.
Oh, fun.
Would you be up for that?
That's up to you and your vulnerability. Yeah, it's not that I would definitely be up for that, because it's not me being put on the spot.
Well, let's think about that. We'll see what comes of it. All right. Wanted to put that out there. And your email address is?
The email address is SN, as in Nicole, McGuire, McGuire 01@gmail.com.
All right.
And the website is I, as in EYE, -perceive.com. And you can reach out to me through the website or directly through email, either way. And then you can always order or schedule a 20-minute free consultation. I do those, no problem. So if you just have questions, or you're not sure, or you just want to know more about all of it, I'm super happy to answer all those questions.
Awesome. Great. Stevie, you're going to have a tremendous impact on the planet and the consciousness. Thank you so much for being with us.
I sure hope so. Thank you for having me.
And after we recorded this, Stevie contacted me and said that she wanted to revise the way that she was doing her practice. She is not going to charge for her readings. She's going to accept donations and referrals, obviously, but she wants this work more than anything to get out into the world. I think this is some of the most therapeutic, soul-based, transformational work that you can do. I did traditional therapy countless hours before I finally found this. And I always say, and we have to now basically on these podcasts, this is not intended to replace therapy with a licensed therapist. And I did that path, and this was more effective. That's my story. The best place, obviously, to start from a liability perspective in this day and age is with a licensed therapist. But keep Stevie in mind, especially with her new offer. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope it touches your soul as much as it has mine. I'm Thomas Miller. Enjoy the journey.